Americans tend to reject the notion that there's a problem until it's too late. For example, there's a three-step process dealing with conflict. First step is the pre-conflict phase, in which information is gathered, but it's not enough for a decision to be made. Secondly, you have the conflict phase, where companies, countries, or different groups step in and try to mitigate and delegate jobs to make sure the problem doesn't arise again. And then you have the post-conflict phase, in which some type of proposal or some type of agreement is established so that the conflict never arises again. The problem is that this typically doesn't happen with the United States. We come up with proposals and agreements, but in the end, we never settle on a type of decision. The most pressing issue, according to renowned scientist Paul G. Harris, is climate change. We signed into effect in 1992 the Framework Convention on Climate Change. However, climate change failed to provide any type of substantial state behavior or change in state behavior.
Foreign policy actions usually occur with growing concerns about the environmental harm done by Americans. However, Americans and the government will only take action if there is specifically concern about the United States economy or the American people themselves being hurt by this change in the environment. In the past, U.S. environmental intervention abroad has been less altruistic than it would appear to be. While the United States does intervene and propose changes to environmental protection in developing nations, often their interest is less in preserving the environment or preventing climate change and more focused on helping United States business and economic interests.
In order to address the problem of climate change, we urge the United States to take on this six-step initiative. In the first step, we want the United States to prepare adaptation plans drawing on the HYGO framework. Based on the assessment of needs and gaps, this task could include the joint development of a disaster reduction plan. It should capitalize on national adaptation plans of action where present and other adaptation initiatives, and should use the concepts and language of the HYGO framework where appropriate. Ideally with action on all five of the HYGO framework's priorities to ensure a comprehensive, integrated, and systematic approach to adaptation. Secondly, conduct baseline assessments on the status of further reduction in disaster prevention. This involves efforts by countries to collect and summarize national risk information, including socioeconomic data concerning vulnerability and institutional capabilities, together with reviews of relevant existing policies, particularly development strategies and sector plans, HYGO framework implementation, adaptation programs, and national risk transfer mechanisms. Thirdly, the United States should allocate funds to further research into climate change and prepare disaster relief funds. Just as an example, China spent an estimated $3.15 billion on flood control between 1960 and 2000, which is estimated to have averted losses of about $12 billion. Another example, the Rio de Janeiro flood reconstruction and prevention program in Brazil yielded an international rate of return exceeding 50%. Property owners in the U.S. Gulf states who implemented hurricane protection methods employed at nearly 500 locations avoided $500 million in property losses from Hurricane Katrina. These customers sustained 8 times less damage than those who chose not to implement the protection measures. Thus, this shows that funds and further research and preparation in disaster relief funds produces dividends in the end. Fourthly, we would like to communicate to other countries that global emissions must be reduced to zero by 2050. Although President Obama currently favors an 80% drop in U.S. carbon emissions by 2050, this number needs to be drastically reduced in order to curb the growth in climate change. Fifthly, we would like to draft a new agreement on carbon capping from the Kyoto Protocol. The protocol is expected to end this year. Although the countries agree to meet in December, the urgency needs to be addressed by the United States. And lastly, the United States should grant most favored nation status to states that make transition to a low carbon economy. So, President Obama, please take these initiatives into consideration. Remember, you did make promises to the American public.
Let me begin by thanking the bipartisan group of U.S. governors who convened this meeting. Few challenges facing America and the world are more urgent than combating climate change. The science is beyond dispute and the facts are clear. Sea levels are rising. Coastlines are shrinking. We've seen record drought, spreading famine, and storms that are growing stronger with each passing hurricane season. Climate change and our dependence on foreign oil, if left unaddressed, will continue to weaken our economy and threaten our national security. I know many of you are working to confront this challenge. In particular, I want to commend Governor Sebelius, Governor Doyle, Governor Christ, Governor Blagojevich, and your host, Governor Schwarzenegger. All of you have shown true leadership in the fight to combat global warming. And we've also seen a number of businesses doing their part by investing in clean energy technologies. But too often, Washington has failed to show the same kind of leadership. That will change when I take office. My presidency will mark a new chapter in America's leadership on climate change that will strengthen our security and create millions of new jobs in the process. That will start with a federal cap and trade system. We'll establish strong annual targets that set us on a course to reduce emissions to their 1990 levels by 2020 and reduce them an additional 80% by 2050. Further, we'll invest $15 billion each year to catalyze private sector efforts to build a clean energy future. We'll invest in solar power, wind power, and next-generation biofuels. We'll tap nuclear power while making sure it's safe, and we will develop clean coal technologies. This investment will not only help us reduce our dependence on foreign oil, making the United States more secure, and it will not only help us bring about a clean energy future, saving the planet, it will also help us transform our industries and steer our country out of this economic crisis by generating 5 million new green jobs that pay well and can't be outsourced. The truth is, the United States can't meet this challenge alone. Solving this problem will require all of us working together. I understand that your meeting is being attended by government officials from over a dozen countries, including the UK, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, and Chile, Poland, and Australia, India, and Indonesia. And I look forward to working with all nations to meet this challenge in the coming years. Let me also say a special word to the delegates from around the world who will gather at Poland next month. Your work is vital to the planet. While I won't be president at the time of your meeting, and while the United States has only one president at a time, I've asked members of Congress who are attending the conference as observers to report back to me on what they learned there. And once I take office, you can be sure that the United States will once again engage vigorously in these negotiations and help lead the world toward a new era of global cooperation on climate change. Now's the time to confront this challenge once and for all. Delay is no longer an option. Denial is no longer an acceptable response. The stakes are too high. The consequences too serious. Stopping climate change won't be easy. It won't happen overnight. But I promise you this, when I am president, any governor who's willing to promote clean energy will have a partner in the White House. Any company that's willing to invest in clean energy will have an ally in Washington. And any nation that's willing to join the cause of combating climate change will have an ally in the United States of America. Thank you.